Blog Talk Radio.
Down to sleep, lay me down. I pray my soul is mine to keep. My soul can never step outside this bed, never into all the evil. Now back from the dead.
Are you scared?
Be here.
The calling hours.
When there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk here.
They will say that I have shed innocent blood. What's blood for, if not for shedding?
Welcome to episode 72 of the Calling Hours Horror Podcast on Horror Society Radio. Once again, it is I, your head undertaker, the dead man Michael Jones of HorrorSociety.com and Living Dead magazine. What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? It's another great night, especially here in Raleigh, North Carolina. And it's going to be an interesting evening. We're going to get into a little bit, and I think that's something I need to bring to the show a little bit more often. Some people seem to think that I'm too nice in interviews or that I don't dig into the really big, relevant issues. So we're going to jump into some of that. And it's going to be really good because tonight on the Dead Man's Autopsy Table, we're going to have special effects artist and actor Vince Collura on. And we're also going to be joined by Z-Con director Michael C. Daughtry. Now, of course, as I said, Michael is the director of Z-Con, and Vince has worked on such titles as Psychotic State, Faces, Jedi Junkies, and, of course, Z-Con. Now, where the controversy comes in is, of course, we're going to talk about all of their work and stuff like that. But there was a big controversy when it comes to Z-Con as it pertains to its fundraising. There was a problem, scandal, and around $30,000 of the budget wound up having to be cut from the film due to some shadiness of outside people. So we're going to delve into all of that around the 8:30 hour. We will also, in our digital dismemberment spotlights for the evening, be covering Scream Factory's special edition Blu-ray release of Wes Craven's The People Under the Stairs. And I know people have been waiting for that to come out for a while. This is another one of those Scream Factory Blu-rays, much like the majority of them from them, chock full of special features, some great interviews, and, of course, the absolutely fantastic film by Wes Craven. We're also going to be, in our second digital dismemberment spotlight, going to be talking about Chemical Burn Entertainment's DVD release of Bloody Indulgent. And I really don't know how I feel about this film, so it's going to be very interesting here in the next couple of minutes when we go into our digital dismemberment spotlight for that film. Definitely falls in the vein of a horror comedy, vein, vampire, all that. But yes, the movie does have vampires, zombies, could almost argue that it's not a horror film. It definitely has musical elements, considering that the lead actor in the film is one of the Backstreet Boys. And we'll go into more details on that when we come up to it. It's definitely an interesting film. There's going to be films that people would compare it to, so I think it's going to be very interesting. We're also doing Behemoth and songs from their CD The Satanist and our Metal Blade Spotlight. And we're going to get to that in just a second. And just so you know, a little bit of background information on Behemoth. And The Satanist is the 10th album by Polish extreme metal band Behemoth. The album was announced on the 31st of May of 2013 and was released February 3rd, 2004, Nuclear Blast, and 4th in Poland via Metal Blade Records and Mystic Productions, respectively. Release was preceded by digital download single Blow Your Trumpet Gabriel and a 12-inch EP under the same title released on December 4th of 2013. Just a little bit more background on that. The Satanist was recorded between February and June 2013 in Hertz Studios and RG Studios, both in Poland, produced by Behemoth. Daniel Bergerstrand and the Wazkowski brothers. The album was mixed by Matt Hyde at Hideaway Studios in Los Angeles and mastered by Ted Jensen at Sterling Sound in New York City. Release of the album was delayed due to the mixing problems, which were made by Colin Richardson, who eventually dropped out of the production. Behemoth considered to work on their album with Josh Middleton, who expected not to use the two parties could not agree to work together. A music video was shot for Gabriel, which was produced in 2013, and Darzius Zergomanowicz. It had premiered on the Behemoth YouTube channel on December 3rd, 2013. So without further ado, let's get into the first song in our Metal Blade Spotlight. The name of the band is Behemoth. The CD is The Satanist. The song is Messe Noir.
Crucify the last prophets, against them with a splinter stabs. Crucify across the earth, and reascend to save himself, and the land cannot hate us.
You just heard the song Messe Noir from the band Behemoth and their most recent CD, The Satanist. Make sure to listen throughout the evening as we will have 2 more Metal Blade spotlights. But now, ladies and gentlemen, it is time for some digital dismemberment.
Digital dismemberment.
In our first digital dismemberment spotlight for the evening, we are going to be covering Chemical Burn Entertainment's The Bloody Indulgent, directed by Ken Rote. Just to give you a little bit of info on this interesting film, after killing the owner of a B-rated strip club, Bert, an indulgent vampire with a zest for life, hides out and dopes up in an upscale drug den until the strippers seeking revenge and the zombies that came out of nowhere all face off for a final confrontation. As I had kind of mentioned in the opening, this is definitely a horror comedy, but there's also a musical element involved with this film, and you know that depending on the person, excuse me, that could definitely lead to, you know, whether you want to see the film or not. There's definitely blood, there's definitely vampires, there's definitely zombies, strippers, transsexuals. There's just a little bit of everything in this film. And one of the highlights of the film, believe it or not, is actually the musical aspect of it. I feel from that perspective, the film was really put together well with musical numbers. Some are certainly more comedic than others, but they all fit the tone of the film. One of the things that I find to be extremely interesting about the film is one of the Backstreet Boys, Kevin Scott Richardson, plays the lead role of Bert, who is, of course, the vampire in question. It's really strange. You see, the film opens up, and he's chasing his best friend, I guess if you want to call him that, Todd, who is played by Brendan Heitkamp. And he winds up chasing him down and biting him, basically turning him into a vampire. And there's a lot of comedic elements that happen to that. There's the jokes about, you know, oh, you bit me, I'm a vampire, and, you know, now I'm bisexual, and things like that. So there's a lot of humor when it comes to that. Now, films that people might compare this to, at least in terms of the musical comedy aspect, would be films like The Phantom of the Paradise or The Rocky Horror Picture Show. You can even throw Repo the Genetic Opera in that mix. I don't think this film is quite as slickly produced as any of those, but again, like I said, the musical quality of the film you can't take away from it. Even if you're not a fan of musicals, they found a way to tie different elements of the film into the musical numbers, including a sex scene that takes place in a dirty bathroom, which is kind of funny. Now, I will say that Richardson does pretty well as Bert. He's definitely a very obnoxious vampire, I guess is the way to put it. And in this world, it appears that vampires are known to exist by society. But he's not a good guy. He's, like I said, he's a real obnoxious kind of dude. And after chasing his friend Todd down, like I said, he attacks him and he bites him. He attacks a bouncer at a strip club called the Bootleg when the bouncer tries to kick him out. One of the other surprise actresses in this film is Diva Zappa, who is Frank Zappa's youngest daughter. She plays Connie, who is Todd's girlfriend, and she calls for everyone in the bar to do something about Bert. This leads to, I don't want to even really call it a fight scene. Bert kind of goes crazy, and you know, people start getting bitten. Connie is in fact bitten. The club owner Sid is bitten as well, is killed. You know, cut to a little bit later on, Bert and Todd go to a drug den who's owned by Claire, who's played by Sharon Ferguson of Quarantine. And she's really an eclectic artist. She kidnaps people from the street. She drugs them and uses them in really strange and assorted photo shoots. You know, face paint, semi-nude, you know, not gothic, but, you know, like 20s, 30s style. And when she's done with them, she shoots them. She basically murders them. And when Bert and Todd show up, she's a little upset that Bert's there, but, you know, basically tells him to behave. So, after all of this, while all of this is going on, there are two groups of people who want revenge against him. The strippers are upset about what he's done, so they are doing a strip-a-thon, basically, to hire a vampire hunter. And there's Connie, who's mad because her boyfriend has turned. Well, Bert has her killed by a vampire hunter, and her body is eventually found by two just random shambling zombies. And they remove the stake from her, and one of them accidentally drools in her mouth, and she comes back as a zombie. The zombies definitely bring a whole nother level of comedic element to the film. One of the really funny things is there's a scene a little bit later on in the film where they're trying to tell her how to attack a victim and eat their brains. So that's kind of funny, and there's kind of a spoof on the Michael Jackson Thriller dance with all of them. It's really goofy, but at the same time, it's kind of funny. But these are talking zombies; they're not fast-moving zombies, so there is a little bit of that to go on. And you know, while going back to Bert and Todd, you know, there's a whole other group of girls in there that he turns into vampires, and this is also, of course, a drug den. So when the artist goes out to get more bullets for her gun, Bert takes control of the drug den and is just basically doing copious amounts of drugs. And I mean, you know, it's kind of funny, you know, seeing a vampire face completely coked out, or, you know, whatever it was that he was doing. It's kind of implied that it was coke, but, you know, the group of strippers raise the money, hire the vampire hunter, show up at the warehouse. Well, the vampire hunter winds up being ambushed by some of the people in the studio, not knowing who he is. And he later winds up getting into a brawl with Tom, and they get into the drug den, and drugs are flying everywhere, and everyone's coked out, and he winds up killing the vampire hunter. Well, the rest of the group shows up to try and save him, and a bloodbath just ensues. Vampires killing zombies, zombies killing vampires, people killing both of them, all the people being killed by Bert and the zombies, gunshots, just everything going on, till there's just one girl left at the end. It's the movie's kind of a jumble. I don't know how else to really explain it to you. It's not the worst thing I've ever seen. It's not the best thing I ever seen. I'm not the biggest fan of musicals myself, but the movie breezes along very quickly. It's around 80 minutes long. And again, you know, you wouldn't think it when you think Backstreet Boys, but Kevin Scott Richardson, again, I thought he did an outstanding job playing his character. I found him to be relatively mild, you know, relatively entertaining during the whole process. This is definitely not a film that is for everybody. I know everybody won't love this film, But I do think that there's enough there that it's entertaining enough to sit down with your friends if you really want a good laugh. If you enjoy somewhat decent music in a comedic setting with a little bit of horror, this could be the film for you. It's not an overly gory film. There's certainly a little bit of blood. There's a little bit of a zombie attack, but you don't really get a lot of gore dripping all over the place. And at the end, it appears that it's left open that Bert may or may not have died. So I don't know if they plan on doing anything else with this, but it, like I said, it's definitely a movie for curiosity's sake that is worth checking out. Overall, I would give the film a 2 out of 5. Again, that's more of a preference because, again, I'm not that big into musicals. I like a lot more horror than comedy in films like this. The production values are pretty much worth it. The acting is very hit or miss depending on who the actor is. And again, like I said, just from a musical standpoint, you know, the film definitely gets higher marks because they certainly found ways to incorporate the musical numbers into the film. There really are no special features to speak of, a trailer. So as an overall, I would give the disc about a 5 out of 10 overall. Some titles have it as Bloody Indulgent or The Bloody Indulgent. So make sure to head on over to Chemical Burn Entertainment and pick up your copy of Bloody Indulgent if you enjoy your vampires and zombies singing along with strippers and transsexuals. Coming up in a few minutes, we're going to go into our feature interview with special effects artist and actor Vince Collura and director Michael C. Daughtry. But before that, we're going to go into our second song in our Metal Blade Spotlight. Once again, the name of the band is Behemoth. The CD is The Satanist. The song is Ben Sahar. That was Behemoth. From their most recent CD, The Satanist, the song was Ben Sahar. Well, it looks like the special deliveries to the morgue have been dropped off, and looking at the autopsy table, and it appears that Vince Collura, I hope I pronounced that right, and director Michael C. Daughtry have joined me in the funeral parlor. Gentlemen, welcome to the Calling Hours Horror Podcast.
Thanks for having us on. Hey, it's glad to be
guys.
here.
I'm glad to have you guys on. You know, we're definitely going to get into Z-Con and the controversy that's happened and all of that. But before we get into any of that, we're going to do a little bit of background on both of you guys. First off, how did the two of you meet? And whoever wants to go first can go first, please.
Sure. Well, I think we met at a bar at a sci-fi convention in Hunt Valley. Is that right, Mike?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we totally.
That doesn't sound any kind of weird at all.
I mean, that's pretty
No,
standard
it
industry
speaks to,
stuff. We meet in the weirdest places sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. I went through this phase when I was just getting started with makeup, where I would go to various conventions, get wasted, and make people into zombies.
In exchange
That's
for
pretty much
beer.
how I got my start. That
Yeah.
sounds pretty similar to mine, so I understand that, yeah.
Yeah, it's a great way to get drunk free. We're cheap.
Yeah. So I was on the tail end of promoting my film Browncoat's Redemption, which was wrapping up last year for 2011. And we were at Shore Leave, which is in Hunt Valley, and a couple of the girls involved in the film were like, hey, there's this guy doing makeup in the bar. He could turn us into Reavers, which is a character, the zombie character from Firefly. So one girl went up and got it done, and then I just stood there. I was like, all right, do this one next. And he's like, okay, whatever. And then do this one next. He's like, all right. And then I'm like, I have this idea for a zombie movie. He goes, okay. And, to Vince's credit, when I first met him, he was using latex, toilet paper, and fake glass. So that will give you an idea of just how far he's come.
Oh, see, Vince and I can compare notes all day. I find that household items tend to be the ones that make the best zombies.
Yeah, for quick and dirty, gnarly-looking zombies, you can get away with doing a lot. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, let's
that's how
start
Mike
with
and I met.
What's that?
That's how
that's
Mike
how
and
you
I
guys met. Well, yeah. I mean, it's funny how you meet people. I went to a haunted house, and that's how I got involved with my first film. So it's crazy ways that you meet people for sure. And typically, those are the people that you wind up working with the most during your career. But let's talk about your guys' careers to start with. Michael, let's start with you. Now, you had brought up Browncoat's Redemption, which was, you wrote it, you directed it, you produced it. Kind of tell us a little bit about what first got you into the film industry to begin with.
A complete accident with a conversation with my friend Stephen Fisher in a Starbucks. So I have no previous film experience. My closest thing to, ever doing film experience was I sat on the couch and I would watch the DVD extras, like Robert Rodriguez's 10-Minute Flick School that's on every DVD. And I'm kind of a junkie for those. It's like I will only buy a DVD if it has extras more than just like commentaries. So we're having a conversation one day and just talking about Firefly and the conversation about, there's really not that much content at the time for the Firefly universe. And why don't we just create some? So Steve and I sat up many nights at Double T Diner till like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. We banged out a story. I wrote the script. And then we thought about getting 20th Century Fox's and Joss Whedon's permission. So we got Fox's approval and Joss Whedon's blessing on the film. Got to include some of the original cast from the TV show and from the movie Serenity. Made a feature-length fan film and distributed it all over the world, raising over $117,000 for charity in a year. Just strictly through online sales and going to grassroots through conventions to conventions.
That's pretty cool, actually.
Thank you.
Now, Vince, you I'm not sure because I couldn't find your age, so I'm not trying to out your age or anything. But now you got your start back in 1991 on something called Queen's Logic. You were the kid playing football, uncredited. Tell us a little bit about that, and then how in 1999 you became of Just a Ticket as well.
Right. So yeah, it's funny. Just a Ticket plays into to my story really well. But the kid playing football, that was a hilarious experience. So, I grew up in Astoria, Queens, and at the time, 91. My God, I must have been like 12 or something. I'm 36 now. So somebody else there can do the math. And I was hanging out in the neighborhood, sort of like one of these kids who just goes around getting into trouble. And my friends and I, we were sort of like just skateboarding around some street, and we see something going on. We see some sort of commotion, and there's all this stuff that now I would recognize as a film crew, but as a 11-year-old, 12-year-old kid, I'm just like, hey guys, there's a lot of equipment there. We should go check that out. That looks cool. And this guy is like standing there playing catch with, a production assistant, and the production assistant drops the ball, so I end up finding it, and I tossed it back to the guy, and that was Robert Redford. So,
oh wow,
he was working on that program, a film called Quiz Show at the time. And then the production assistant, sort of took down everybody's names and numbers. And, I went home and I told my mom, who was a big Robert Redford fan, and I'm like, yeah, Mom, I met this guy. Nothing ever came about it. I didn't get involved in the Quiz Show. But then when they were filming Queen's Logic, they called my mom, and they called all the other kids' moms because, at the time you don't have cell phones or anything like that. And they said, listen, we want your kids to come down to Astoria Park and play some football. Just touch football. And that was it. So that's how I got my first non-credited spot in a film. Just a Ticket was interesting. Just a Ticket came out of, I've been doing sci-fi and mostly science fiction, but then horror conventions more recently. I've been doing conventions for all of my adult and late teen life. And I don't remember who it was, but somebody had come down to Icon, which was a show out at Stony Brook University in, I guess, the year 1998. And, I was a cosplayer just like everyone else. And whoever it was sort of taking notes on who had decent costumes, et cetera, et cetera. And took my name and number down and called me because they wanted me to come down to Manhattan in a Star Trek uniform. Because the scene I'm in Just a Ticket with Andy Garcia and Andy McDowell takes place where Andy Garcia plays a ticket scalper, and I guess he's sort of on the lam, so he's running through this convention. So that was the hookup there.
Okay. Now you both took a similar route after that. You both have done TV stuff. Michael, you did. You were a production assistant on it says TV series, but it seems like IMDb's really bad about whether or not something's TV or web. What can you tell us about Damned from 2011 and from Mythos in 2012?
Both of those are from crew from the Guest Browncoats production. Damned is Kevin Troy, who was one of the leads in Browncoats, wrote and directed Damned, which starred some of the cast like Miriam Paltrow and Michael Levy from Browncoats. Miriam went on to write and direct her own and star in her own web series Mythos. And I'm just, any people that I work with that are pretty awesome, I'm always happy to help out. So if somebody asks for a favor or, contributing to their campaign, I'm always willing to do it. So it's one of those things where it's kind of reciprocity for me that these people worked for free for a fan film, and it's the least I could do to work a day on their set or contribute to a film.
Certainly. Now, Vince, for you did, in 2012, you did Selling New York. Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, that was fun. That was my day job is I work in real estate. I run a company called Gotham Photo Company. We're a real estate media provider. Essentially, we provide photography for high-end listings in Manhattan. And several of my clients are on that show as well as the $1 Million Listing Show. So eventually, one of the technologies that we were promoting at the time was of interest to the show. So they did a segment on our virtual staging product, which is a 3D product where we digitally strip out any furniture that would be in a photograph and replace it with better looking stuff, or just fill an empty home that's being sold with furniture. So we did, that was a funny experience because we did 9 hours of shooting, single camera, for what amounted to be 1 minute and 10 seconds, for something that was supposed to be unscripted. It was an interesting experience because while they only sent one camera person, they had camera, audio, some PA, and a guy whose title was script supervisor. So it was my first experience doing reality TV. It was kind of fun, but kind of tedious because I had sort of just was doing my regular business with this client. And then he said, okay, let's do that again, but I want to shoot it from another angle. And out of nowhere, he starts calling me out on the variations in what I'm saying from, minute to minute, because I'm here just doing my own business, right? Like, I'm expecting, okay, if Bravo's going to come in or whoever it was, they're just going to shoot it. We'll be done in an hour. It'll be great. But no, this guy was like calling me out. He was like, sir, when you showed the images the first time, you showed the living room photo first and then the bedroom photo. Can you do that again? So that was that experience.
Now, Michael, for you, the next thing that happened was you were a co-producer on Ninjas vs. Monsters. And I had heard of Ninjas vs. Monsters, but when I was doing my research, especially on IMDb, it said in this final installment. Were there other segments before this, and how did you become involved as a producer for Ninja vs. Monsters?
I got to thank Justin Timpane, Corey Opucci, and Daniel Ross for that. Ninjas vs. Monsters is the end of a trilogy. The first is Ninjas vs. Zombies. The second is Ninjas vs. Vampires. And it's one of those things, because we're such a small film community, you have a lot of overlap. So Daniel Ross, who was in the Ninjas vs. movies, appears in Z-Con. We've had Kirk Scarstead, who was the lead bad guy in Browncoats. He's the bad guy in the second Ninjas vs. movie. So I got to know Justin and the crew, and I just kind of helped out. And I'm currently helping out by distributing the film. So I can get you a definite copy of Ninjas vs. Monsters.
I would definitely be interested in reviewing that.
Yeah, I'll definitely get you. We'll coordinate. I'll get you a copy.
Definitely. All right. This is going to be the main bulk of the conversation. So let's move on to Z-Con. And before we get to the fundraising part of it, let's just talk about Z-Con first. How it came about. On your IMDb pages for both of you, of course, you have Z-Con, the movie, and then you have Z-Con, proof of concept film. Kind of talk about how the concept for Z-Con came about, and what did the proof of concept film do for you guys that led to the actual movie?
So the genesis of Z-Con all comes back to Browncoats, because Browncoats, I spent about almost 2 years of my life just going to conventions up and down the East Coast and across the U.S., from San Diego Comic-Con and Emerald City Comic-Con on the West Coast to Granite State Comic-Con and Baltimore Comic-Con and things like that here. And I started to notice something since 2000, and this is just before Walking Dead came out, and it was kind of rumblings that it was going to happen. 2009, if somebody cosplayed a zombie at a convention, people would take a really wide berth. They're like, that's pretty gross. We're not getting close. And then as zombies became more and more pop culture, you would start seeing people get closer and closer, then taking selfies with the zombie. So as I'm promoting Browncoats Redemption, the idea of this zombie movie that takes place in a comic book convention, or something like Dragon Con, which is a multi-genre convention, started to take genesis. And then I'm like, all right, I would get sick a lot after conventions. I'd get con crud. I'm terrible with it. And for those listeners that don't know what con crud is, it's when you go to a convention of hundreds of people and they all touch the same doorknob, and the one jackass has the flu and never washed his hands. So
can I just amend that statement?
Go for
Hundreds of thousands of people with questionable hygiene. I think
I was trying to be polite, but you're absolutely right. It's people with extremely questionable hygiene all
yeah, you
together.
ever smell a convention on day 3?
It smells like The Walking Dead.
Yeah. I mean, it's lunch meat. It's total lunch meat.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mike. Go on.
No, not a problem. So then I thought about, okay, how would you get zombies at a convention where people it would probably be a while before somebody realized an actual zombie was there. So what if Concrete actually created zombies? And for it to actually, this is where you separate science from reality. The incubation period for, creating a zombie, like an undead creature, would be days, but for the sake of a movie, it has to happen in hours. And if you've ever gotten Concrete, you could literally get Concrete within the first 7 hours of being at a convention.
Right.
Doesn't take much. So then I spent 6 months working on the idea at and there's video of it somewhere where I'm extremely intoxicated at the Broncos Redemption wrap-up party in 2011 in Dragon Con, and I announced that my next film is Z-Con. And what Z-Con is the story of 4 kids with a podcast who go to a convention to interview their favorite celebrity, but get trapped in the middle of a zombie outbreak and become the man-on-the-street reporters, letting the world outside know what's really happening. Because I wanted to take advantage of social media in a way that I haven't seen it in zombie movies. I wanted to take advantage of the community of unwashed masses at a convention and try to, maybe scare some people into washing their hands and taking a shower the way that people got scared of going to the beach with Jaws. It just wrapped around the funness of a zombie movie. And, the premise of Broncos Redemption was I make no money off of this. I've never been paid from any of my films. All the films are nonprofit and then go to raise money for charities. So the first 5 charities were Dyslexia Foundation, Kids Need to Read, Al Wooten Jr. Heritage Center, Marine Corps Law Enforcement Foundation, and I am totally blanking on the 5th, so I'm going to hate myself later. But Equality Now, which is Joss Whedon's chosen charity. So the money got the $117,000 got divided up between those charities over the course of the year, paid quarterly, and then that idea kind of got carried over to Z-Con, which is make an original idea and give the proceeds to charity. So the charities impacted by this are the American Red Cross, because it's a zombie movie with blood, and then Kids Need to Read, which was co-founded by Nathan Fillion and PJ Harzma, and is currently run by Denise Derry and a whole bunch of amazing people. And the reason for that is the comic book convention. So reading is fundamental, pardon the phrase, and it just makes sense to go along with these movies. So where that led up to is in 2012, Amanda Palmer did an amazing job fundraising for her thing, raised $2-point-something million, which was unheard of in crowdfunding at that time. And I'm like, I only need 10% of that to make my movie. I only need $250,000. So you can find it if that's out there. I'm not hiding it at all. There's a very failed Kickstarter campaign for the feature film for $250,000 that really only raised $24,000 at the end of it. So I was quickly watching the clock come down, and I went, okay, what can we do? The biggest feedback I'm hearing is that it's a really great idea, but people can't envision what this would look like. So the talk of proof of concept came into play. So somebody's like, well, what if you did a proof of concept? Show people what it was. So I immediately reached out to all of those supporters of the first failed Kickstarter and said, I'm going to flip this immediately into another Kickstarter for a proof of concept. Will you stay on board? 80% of them did. We got a few new people and a little bit more. And the first successful crowdfunding campaign, 100% went to the proof of concept, which you can find on YouTube, which is really just 5 scenes of the movie kind of mashed in together in a lower quality filming of what the feature film would ultimately look like. But I wanted to give you an idea of who the kids were, why they were there, the kind of world they were in, show that we were legitimately going to set it in a convention, not a hotel, because there's a difference between those type of things, and you need something that's a little bit more massive than just taking over the first floor of a hotel. From there, we did the proof of concept, we did a pre-production crowdfunding, and then we did a production crowdfunding, and then that led us right up into February of 2014 where we had our production meeting, and then into filming in June. And then that gets into the really good stuff, which is what you really want to talk to Vince and I about.
Okay, yeah. Well, we're going to jump into all of that here in a second. Now, Vince, I wanted to ask you, because I watched the video for the zombie makeup special effects of Z-Con.
Okay.
And, of course, being a fellow effects artist and my specialty being zombies, of course, I was really impressed with, like there's the one where the girl is biting the throat out of the one guy in the yellow shirt. I thought that looked extremely impressive. Especially when it comes to zombie films, we as effects artists can get away with a little bit more when it comes to the gore, the blood, and how we make it all go down. When you were presented with the idea as the effects artist for this film, kind of talk about what your process was like getting your crew and all of your makeup together for the film.
Okay. So when Mike first approached me with the script, right? So after that, sort of initial conversation, he and I had a lot of conversations about, what the mythology is of this virus and how that would work, right? So I just sort of got to sketching and thinking about palettes and stuff like that. And I think with anything where it's going to be low budget but done right, you have to figure out how to limit the tools of your artists who are, in most cases donating their time or most of their time to all this, so that you can get some level of consistency, right? Like as a special effects artist, obviously I'm never happy with what I've done a year ago or 2 years ago entirely, right? Like between that, the short that you saw was from the proof of concept to the film. The makeup changed drastically, but it was a great proving ground to say, okay, I can take a team of competent makeup artists, we have some great people, give them a half a day or a day of training on how we're going to approach this, and sort of have a unified procedure. So it was really, for me, it was about two or three things, right? Sort of building and limiting the toolkit to what I wanted to ultimately see, and then just training people on the thought behind and the process behind creating these guys. We didn't have, especially with the proof of concept, we didn't have sort of pre-designated zombies. In fact, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, we didn't know who any of our zombies were until we got to set. So it's not
I think the only zombie that we really had was Kim Krutz, who was we had a couple. We had our proof of concepts like Evan.
Oh, that's true. We had those guys come back. Yeah.
We had a bunch of people who, like, Vince and I did a really smart thing, which was we had stages of makeup where we did makeup tests and photo shoots and saw what it looked like on camera. You could see a lot of those early makeups of what they look like in the very, very, very first proof of concept and the original Kickstarter video. If you want to see an evolution of Vince's effects, look at the proof of concept Kickstarter, look at the proof of concept makeup, and then look at the trailer and stuff that we have online, and you'll see an amazing evolution of an artist.
Now, let's get to the meat of the conversation. You guys had your fundraiser, and then something unimaginable happened.
Yes,
from
very unimaginable.
Correct me on numbers. I'll let you name,
sure.
You can name whatever names you want, because I know that there's possible legal ramifications coming, so I will let you guys describe the situation where you're comfortable. But from reports that I've read and things that I've read online, you guys did all of your fundraising, and then approximately, about $30,000 had to be cut from the budget, right?
Correct. It was a little over $30,000. And what has happened, how we arrived at all that stuff was, Mike, I'm going to let you fill in the blanks as far as the crowdfunded numbers go. But once we did our crowdfunding and that came to a close, we said, okay, we're going to make the movie for this amount of money. We're going to make that work. And then somewhat out of nowhere, I get contacted from somebody that I grew up with, who at the time I was under the understanding that she'd worked on films. She claimed that she did some work for Cloverfield and a couple of other films. None of that checks out, by the way. And she contacted me and said, listen, I just saw that your Indiegogo page is closed, right? You've done your campaign, but my husband and I, we want to raise some money on your behalf. So immediately I call Mike up, and I'm like, Mike, listen, this might be cool. This might be a really good thing for us. Look, if your budget for a film is $30,000 or $40,000, even $1,500 going into that budget makes a huge difference. So I have very low expectations at first. Mike and I, at the time, I remember this now, I was just getting ready to leave for vacation. And at the time, the young lady who contacted me said, listen, we're going out this weekend, and we're going to try to raise some money for you. So Mike ended up putting together a page which would just let you use PayPal to make a contribution to the film. And immediately we got a call back saying, hey, listen, that doesn't work. So obviously I'm thinking, Mike, you must have messed something up. Mike tested it out. I tested it out. It all works. Skip to, the next day. She says, listen, that page didn't work for us. So we're going to go out and we're going to try to raise this in cash. We're not going to try to get people to use their credit cards on our iPads. I said, all right, look, do whatever you got to do. And by the end of that weekend, I think they had raised $3,000 or $4,000. Mike, you might remember differently, or is that accurate?
No, that's accurate. I mean, keep in mind the timeline of all of this was she reached out to you initially in February. We're scheduled to start filming in June or July. So yes. A lot of this was just to support your numbers. We raised just shy of $60,000 through crowdfunding, and not all of that would go to the production. A lot of that had to go to paying for rewards, shipping and handling, and things of that nature. So we were just shy of $40,000 for a production budget. And then what Vince is talking about is about April or May, if I'm remembering my dates correctly. And then, we're getting into that comfortable place where there's, even like as Vince said, even if it was $1,500, it was still early enough out that it could have made a huge difference. Like $1,500 on an indie set could have been, 4 SAG actors for a day, feeding the craft services, buying more.
I was going to say, yeah, I mean, that covers craft services for like a week.
and beyond. Yeah. So, keep in mind, up until May, I'm still of the mindset of, we don't really have this money, so, it's not that big of a deal. And then June is where things got really interesting, so I'll let you take it from there.
Sure. So now June rolls around. Now, I'll state this. When Mike and I first started dealing with this couple, it was, again, a girl that I went to grammar school and high school with, knew all my life, and her new husband. The first thing Mike did was started researching her, because she had claimed, listen, I've done fundraising before, and lo and behold, it turns out there's a lot of good press about her doing fundraising for a lot of nonprofits. So
and for tens of thousands of dollars, not just like chump change.
Yeah. So things felt really good at that point. And over the course of the entire month of June, they were supposedly a bunch of events. And I was getting, I have 900 pages printed up of all this stuff to submit to evidence. But I was getting, text updates and Facebook updates constantly, email updates constantly with their current totals. And it went from $3,000 or $4,000 to $7,000 to $18,000 and all the way up over $30,000. Probably around $32,000, $33,000, I believe. Might be more than that by the end of June. So this is great. I'm contacting Mike. I'm keeping Mike in the loop the entire time, and Mike's now adjusting. Right? Mike's saying, okay, well look, our budget was $40,000. Now it's $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. Right? And about a week before production, we start discussing, okay, let's get that transfer going. And they asked us for our banking information. This wasn't out of the blue, but there were a lot of conversations surrounding it. Asked us for our wire transfer information. And a couple of days go by and nothing comes through. So we start to sort of scratch our heads, hey, what's going on here? That happened a couple of times. And then at some point, we get some communications from Kellyanne and her husband, James. And then they looped in their accountant, who was actually handling everything, because these guys do so much nonprofit fundraising that they have a team behind them. or at least that was the story at the time. The accountant confirms, okay, it looks like maybe I submitted something wrong. You know, there's routing numbers as well as account numbers and stuff like that. Something gets flipped. So he corrects that, and he says, listen, you're going to get a call from our bank confirming, which, okay, that's a little bit of reality we'd like to see. Getting contact from anybody else at this point would be good. And Mike received that call. Right, Mike?
I did, and something else to note is that they mentioned that they were having an issue with their bank, saying sending a large amount of money between two organizations or two businesses for the first time tends to get flagged on one side or the other, just to make sure that it's not like money laundering or anything like that. So I called my bank, which was PNC at the time, and I said, hey, this is what's going on. This is the amount of money. And they said, you know what, that's absolutely right. It does happen when you exchange greater than $10,000 between two banks for the first time. One or both banks will hold it up for at least 3 to 4 business days, just to make sure everything's on the up and up. And then that's where
my experience too in business. I mean, I've had wire transfers, you know, payment for legitimate software development work that I was doing back in the day, held up sometimes 30 days. So it's not unheard of. So Mike gets the call. This is really good because we're starting production like tomorrow at this point, right, Mike? You're getting a call in a couple of days.
We're literally 7 days out at this point.
Okay. So yeah, Mike gets the call, confirms all the information. They say, okay, it should be to you in 2 to 3 business days max. Nothing comes through. So we start contacting my friend Kellyanne Patricia, who's very responsive. And that's one thing I'll say is these guys, while they might not have been legitimate, they were super responsive. And Kellyanne and her husband James they're actually coming down to the place where we're shooting. I want to say Dundalk, but no,
Glen Burnie.
Okay, Glen Burnie, because they're getting involved with the film. They're going to help build the set. Kellyanne has effects experience and supposedly had the licenses necessary for squids. And her husband, James, who's ex-military, that left with some very, very prestigious awards, supposedly, is helping us out with decommissioned military equipment and getting some active service people as stand-ins for our big, like, Army-ish standoff. So, okay, they're on their way down. I'm on my way down. We get to the first day of filming, and the money's still not there. So I said, listen, guys, you know, we're in deep can I say deep shit on the air? Yeah.
You can say whatever you want.
Okay, good. I'm like, okay, guys, we're in deep shit without this money. You know, we need to get this handled. So they say, well, listen, we're using Capital One Bank. Why don't you meet us at the bank? And what we're going to do is we're going to withdraw the money. Maybe it's a bank, you know, cashier's check or whatever, and we'll hand it to you and we can settle up. So I say, this is great. I mean, I'm supposed to be there building the set, but I think, you know, getting half of our budget or nearly half of our budget takes precedence over my feeble tool-wielding hands on set. So I take the day and I meet them at the local bank. But I get to the bank before them. And then I'm met with a couple of text messages stating that James, the husband, is having chest pains, and they're going to the hospital. So the next morning, James died, which was really, that was, how do you even handle something like that, right? We shut down production for the day. You know, James, at this point, was going to be named as a producer on the film, I think. I don't remember if that was accurate or not. But, you know, we were going to name him as a producer on the film. We're going to do in memory of. I had already started looking into, within 24 hours, seeing what we could do of doing like a film scholarship for like $5,000 or something in his name. So, right. You know, because we're now literally on day 6 of production, like things are moving at a rapid pace. I mean, you've made movies or worked on films, so you know that like any kind of like lull in momentum just kills everything.
Sure.
So that lull was not going to happen, and Mike did a great job of seeing to that. my attention was now split between maintaining the effects department, learning the makeup department, and trying to get my hands on these funds that we need to survive at this point because we've adjusted our budget. Well, needless to say, the girl's husband dies, so she needs a day. I totally get that. Then I get contacted by Patty Svet, who has been known to me as Kellyanne's sister in the past, but it turns out they're cousins. And it turns out that Kellyanne was so distraught over what had happened to her husband that she tried to commit suicide while she was in the hospital. So now the story is Kellyanne is in the psych ward of Anne Arundel Medical Center, which surprisingly doesn't actually have a psych ward, but we'll get to that later. And I'm now communicating with the sister to try to get everything sorted out. So,
and keep in mind, we also had Michael and Michelle, who are both, I believe both are EMTs, but Michelle's got a nursing background. And everything that was being said from a psychological point of view of her treatment and where she was going and what was going to be needed completely lined up with the proper procedures. And we even took some time away from set to make sure that we could, because they're not from Maryland and I am, they're not familiar with where things are, just make sure that she's going in the right direction of who she's got to talk to. And, we're completely helping every step along the way, because every step along the way, there's at least 3 data points that line up to being completely accurate in the real world.
Yeah, that was one thing that was a constant here, is that the data points did sound good. And that speaks to their experience as scam artists and also the RN, registered nurse status, that Kellyanne holds.
Right.
So this continues on for a couple of days where I'm just, checking with the sister, hey, how are things going? I'm telling Mike and Mike's ADs and everybody else involved with the film, look, we need to give them some space. You guys deal with it. I'm gonna stay on them, and that's what they did. They kept the machine churning. So a couple more days go by, and my patience starts to wane as the pressure increases from not having nearly 50% of our budget, and I push a little bit more for some answers. In fact, I pop into the hospital that Kellyanne's supposedly at, and my first attempt at the hospital, I can't find Kellyanne and can't find record of her husband, James Kibijo, at the time. Now, when I question the sister about that, the sister tells me that, Kellyanne has had problems with her psycho ex-stalker who just recently got out of jail, so she's listed privately. So this goes on for a couple of days where I'm following up, and I'm unable to really get anywhere. And again, that's logical. In fact, I remember specifically Kellyanne telling me about a psycho ex-stalker. So I'm buying it. Eventually, I make it to the hospital, and I interface with somebody there who allows me to take them out for coffee. And I gain their trust, and I have them do a search for me. They're not able to provide any information. They confirmed that there's nobody privately held under those names. There's nobody there under a private booking or anything like that. And this is where it gets really weird. So as I'm quite literally stationed at the hospital when I'm not needed on set, eventually Kellyanne's sister loses her temper and comes and meets me downstairs, which was really interesting. So now, obviously I'm still very concerned about my friend Kellyanne. And now that I'm seeing the sister in the hospital, I'm no longer concerned that something funny is going on. He says, listen, Can we go visit? Can we go visit Kellyanne? I need to see Kellyanne. And she takes me upstairs to her room. And as we approach the room, the door closes. And quite literally, the doctor who's leaving the room says, I'm sorry, but this person cannot have any visitors. And as I saw the door closing, I saw some bed. Okay, looks legit. Don't think anything of it. A couple more days go by. I can't get a response from the sister anymore. But I get a response, or I get a call out of the blue from a really interesting guy named John Carter, Sergeant Master or Master Sergeant John Carter, out of Fort Meade. And he explains, listen, my best friend just died. My best friend, James, he and I were heavily involved in all this stuff together. I'm going to get you everything he promised you and more. In fact, here's an inventory list, which was exhaustive. It was amazing. He was getting us 200 sets of decommissioned ARs and BDUs and 2 decommissioned Jeeps and all this crazy stuff, as well as the money they raised for us. So, I mean, I'm now coming back to the set with a big smile for the first time. And we start working with him. So, interestingly enough, they set a delivery date. Let's just say it's a Friday. And Friday happens and nobody shows up. But, of course, I'm getting contacts from both Patricia and Sergeant Master John Carter at the time. And I'd say we lost about 2 days to the notion of they needed to inventory and check out every single piece of equipment, which, again, it's a data point that lines up with how this procedure would go.
I'm former military, and I've done inventory checks, and when you're taking large supplies out, it can take some time because you're going through piece by piece.
Oh, sure. I'm ex-military as well, so yeah. I mean, I definitely see how all of this is lining up.
So this continues, and these guys can't seem to find the warehouse that we built into a set that's less than 10 miles from the base. And, there were about 5 missed deliveries at this point where I'm at the warehouse until 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning.
You were actually on set for 48 hours straight.
Yeah, we won't talk about how that smelled by the end of it for me personally. But yeah, this went on for a bunch of days. And, mind you, the entire time, I don't go 3 hours without hearing from somebody. It's quite literally that level of contact, which is what made this scene very viable at the time. A couple more things happen where they finally say, okay, we scouted the area. I mean, I met somebody for coffee who was supposed to be this John Carter guy. And they come back and they say, listen, we were just about to deliver, but your facility is not really secured. So, we've got to get some cameras installed. We've got to do all this stuff, including that they're now supposedly providing us a detail, which, we won't even go into detail on the detail because that's just craziness. Our landlord gets a call from a security company that needs their permission to install the video cameras on behalf of the U.S. Army. Our landlord grants permission, and this never happens. Now, there's plenty of other instances. As I mentioned, my evidence log is 900-plus pages. So the long story short, this went on throughout the end of production. I'll say that Mike and I probably didn't really come to terms with the fact that we had been had thoroughly until the last couple of days of production. But this went on just taking up our time. I mean, we made a movie and chased ghosts for, all hours of the night during the month of July of last year. So Mike, the ADs, and the production team did a great job of figuring out how we're going to do this without the money that we need. And we said, okay, we can't do what we set out to do. And a course change this massive, this late in the game, isn't going to happen. So we shot, I think we shot about 65, 70% of what we had hoped to accomplish during that month. Most importantly, though, we shot everything we needed to shoot at that location. So at least that location is tied out.
Right.
And look, at this point, we just made it work the best way how. We had supporters of ours, people who had already donated through the crowdfunding campaign. I mean, the Rapinskis were running to the store to get a black velvet cake mix because we couldn't really afford to keep on going with Fleet Street at the time. Yeah, we made it work. We made it work. Now, do I still have Mike on the phone?
Yep, I'm here.
Mike's here.
Okay, cool. We made it work the best we could. They said, all right, let's wrap this location and figure it out. So we did just that. And when I got back, Mike and I, one thing about both of us is we're pretty tenacious and obsessive. So Mike and I start looking into this Kellyanne chick. Now, obviously, at this point, we realize we've been had, we're trying to figure out how we've been had and why we've been had. Because if you consider the fact that the two parties that we know, Kellyanne and Patricia, were involved and highly allocated to this, right? I mean, as I mentioned, I didn't go 3 hours without hearing from somebody. They had two males helping them out, as well as whoever was, meeting me at the hospital. There's a lot of people involved for a lot of time.
And I can understand that if you're trying to get money out of somebody, but they never asked for a dime. The closest thing they did was ask for our banking information to do a wire transfer, but getting information for an ACH transfer doesn't get you access to my bank account. So I wasn't really worried about a withdrawal of funds as much as I was just worried about the, identity theft of that level of information.
Sure.
So, again, though, the big question is, how did they figure out, okay, we're going to take the time out to do all of this, right? You're talking about including 4 or 5 people for a lot of their time, for a lot of weeks, for some cut of the $30,000 they potentially raised for us. I mean, if I called you tomorrow, Michael, and I said, hey, listen, Michael, I have a scheme. We're going to get rich. I'm going to get you $7,000. All you have to do is break the law consistently for a month. That doesn't make sense.
Right.
Well,
really
the other side of the coin is I'm a huge geek, so I've been playing D&D for years. And that may not sound relevant, but when you're a GM and you're running a game, you have to think of a story that would last hours, and you have to think of how multiple people would be impacted by that story for any story to be good. Now,
sure.
That's a story that will last 4 or 5 hours. Maybe there's a story arc that lasts a couple game sessions. But this is a story that lasted almost 6 months. From the first point of contact with Vince in February all the way through to August, where we kind of just ceased communication. So that's being heavily invested for something that just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. At best, if they raised that money, they're talking about $30,000. However, now anything is in question, right?
Certainly. Now, from a legal standpoint, after all of this has happened, if and when you contacted the authorities, what did the authorities say to you? What happened with
Sure. So
with the crowdfunding?
We ran this up and down the flagpole in a couple of different ways. First off, we gave them a couple of weeks when we got back to New York to produce a death certificate, because if and when we saw a death certificate, we said, okay, now we would just eventually get us the money, and we'll call it a day, right? Like there was a legitimate death. So we sort of held our tongue for a couple of weeks. We gave them that time. Once it became apparent there was no death certificate coming in the mail, we ran it up and down the flagpole authority-wise. First, we contacted the FBI. The FBI actually routed us to Army counterintelligence, because several of the phone numbers they were using to communicate with us did tie back to military phone numbers. And there was some information divulged, actually, which we won't go into detail on, which would be classified, just in terms of the scheduling and some of the logistics of the base. So then we dealt with Army Counterintelligence Division for a little while. After we got nowhere with them, we decided to contact the DA here in Queens.
But before we did that, we actually wanted to make sure that we had something worthwhile, and we talked to somebody who is a retired DA, gave over all the information, let them kind of ask every question they possibly could, look over the 900 pages of information, and what we were told was 3 things. One, given the information, this person would have made the exact same choices that we made. 2, there's definitely a case here, if not criminal, for a breach of contract, to stolen valor for impersonating military officers, to a long list, and actually gave us the things that we need to say when we contacted the DA. So from there, we contacted the New York District Attorney, and then I'll let you take it from there.
Sure. So we contacted the New York DA, got a great guy assigned to our case, gave him the 900 pages of documentation. He reviewed it, and we had a couple of meetings. And during the meetings, there were a couple of things that were suspect. In fact, every angle was sort of questioned. He said, listen, the bulk of this crime would probably be breach of contract in the sense that you do have, the email would constitute a written agreement. You do have an agreement where she's raising funds on your behalf and she is claiming certain amounts of money. So therefore, you have breach of contract. But that's not really something the DA wants to prosecute. That's something we could pursue in civil court. Now, needless to say, the production's in debt at this point, so we're not investing more money in an attorney when we don't even believe that at this point the parties have our money anymore. Then the DA looks at wire fraud as a possible, as well as Stolen Valor Act. And he sort of refers us out. He says, listen, Stolen Valor Act, you want to talk to Army Counterintelligence. And for wire fraud, because they didn't get anything from you, meaning they didn't take money from our account, he felt that the case was weak. And he left off with us that, one, if we could show him any evidence of the actual funds raised on our behalf, he would pick the case back up and light it up. Or two, if we could find other victims of these parties that might have some evidence, he would pick it back up. So, things kind of died on the vine for a little while. With that said, as I mentioned, Mike and I are both obsessive people, so we've been watching the parties that have us off. And we've seen a fairly healthy presence online, and we've seen that they've been doing some other fundraising for some other organizations. So this is where, we pulled a little bit of a stunt, I'll say, and I attended one of said fundraisers. Now, I think this girl's crazy at this point. The DA even suggested that she might have been a super fan of the movie or the type of work we're doing or something, and she just wanted to do this to get close to us. There's definitely something off with this girl. So I thought about it, and I said, well, if I just show up at this fundraiser, she'll probably run if she sees me coming. Right. So I used my makeup artist skills and put on a silly disguise, which turned out to be pretty effective. And what I did was I went down with a couple of friends, my wife and an old boss, and we went and we interviewed Kellyanne on camera, which was really interesting. So the interview was started out about the event. What are you doing here at St. Michael's Cemetery? Blah, blah, blah. She talked about the nonprofit she was doing the work for. And then my friend Dave Butler switches conversation and asks, so tell me about your involvement with ZCon. And immediately Kellyanne clams up, and her sister just gets up from the table and walks in the opposite direction. Kellyanne says, what's ZCon? And Dave says, well, I had heard your name was involved. You were doing some fundraising. And that's where things got interesting. Kellyanne says, oh, well, I've been in the hospital for the last 8 weeks. And then she had sort of grabbed one of the people from the nonprofit who corroborated that story. So, wow, where does that leave us? Cut to about a year later, maybe a month ago, right? I decided, I need to start looking at this again. Now, Mike and I had some long conversations about how we're going to pursue this, and we decided that at this point, we're probably not going to be pursuing this case legally. So let's at least get the word out about her. That way nobody else gets taken in the same way.
And keep in mind, at this point, the films we still haven't been able to finish filming the movie because we left with about $31,000, the exact amount of money that was in this exchange worth of debt. So since of August of last year up until now, I've personally, with the help of a few people with a few $100 here and there, took $31,000 down to $10,000. So we have about $10,000 of remaining debt. And that's still being worked on while we're going through all of this. So it's not like the film's been abandoned. It's just kind of on hold.
Right.
And it's just an absolute damn shame. So.
Oh, it is. It's such a great script and a fun concept.
I mean, you look at all of this that happened, and I always ask independent filmmakers who utilize fundraising, overall, what are your, it seems like it's worked well for you guys in the past, but of course you got stung with all of this. From a filmmaker standpoint, what do you feel like would be the best advice that you could give to fellow filmmakers who want to get into using fundraising for their film? And what would you tell the fans who want to donate to films? What would you tell them to watch out for? Like everything you said, everything in your situation, it seemed to line up. Numbers lined up, people lined up, dates lined up. How can you tell when you are really giving to a legitimate source?
Well, here's the thing. You're asking me as a filmmaker, how can you tell you're giving to a legitimate source? Our problem isn't, were people giving to a legitimate source. It's were we receiving funds from a legitimate source.
Right.
Look, I'm going to be honest with you. This is my second feature film ever. I've done a bunch of shorts. I've helped people with shorts. I made a really novice mistake in trusting all the data points that everything lined up, and I said yes to things that were within that budget that I didn't have money for. So I put a lot of faith in the same place that Vince put a lot of faith, and the mistake that a filmmaker can learn from me is it's a don't count your chickens before they're hatched. Like, while it sounds like while your production team really wants that new lighting rig or that dolly setup or a little bit more money for this or a little bit more money for that, until you have that cash in your hand, say no. It doesn't exist. Because had I said no until that money existed, which meant the first quarter to a half of our production, if the money was actually legit, would have felt really chintzy compared to what we did, we wouldn't be in debt right now.
Sure.
That being said, what can a filmmaker learn to do that again? I would love to tell you to research the people, but I am, and Vince will tell you, I am the most pessimistically optimistic person in the world, and I researched the hell out of this person, and I was cautiously optimistic the entire time. Like, it really didn't sink in that it could have been real for me until the PNC Bank said, yep, this is exactly the process that you should take. So until you have somebody that is putting a check in your hand and that check clears a bank, because people can write fraudulent checks all day long.
Sure.
And until you have money in that account, don't do anything. From a crowdfunding point of view, how can a community know that they're supporting a filmmaker that is worthwhile? What's your track record? Honestly, up until this moment with Zcon, I had a stellar track record. We made a feature-length film. 100% of the proceeds went to charity. The people that needed to get paid back got paid back. The charities got their money. We were very public about where everything went. I prefer to be as transparent as possible when I can be, if it's not going to hurt, like, for example, this criminal case. But, in this situation, I had no reason not to be trusted.
Sure.
We could not foresee that this was actually going to be the outcome. So if you're contributing to a crowdfunding film and it's somebody you don't know, it's a lot of blind faith. Look at what they've done in the past. Look at what they intend to do. Ask them honest questions. Like, just because they've got a crowdfunding running for 20 remaining days doesn't mean you have to give on day 20. You could ask the filmmaker questions, and if they respond to you, contribute on day 18. The money is just important on day 18 as it is on day 20.
Sure.
But if you're leery or you're cautious, ask questions, and do your vetting.
One thing I want to add to that is, while we do have a fiasco on our hands because of the funds that were supposedly raised by these people, the crowdfunding end of it, where Mike utilized Kickstarter and Indiegogo, were pretty solid. And, while I won't say that nothing bad happens via those platforms, at least those platforms tend to be tied to a real person, whereas
Sure.
potentially giving cash at an event where you don't actually know where it's going because you don't know the filmmaker and you don't know who you're handing that cash to, would be a higher risk situation. You know, all of our contributors that helped us out through Indiegogo and Kickstarter, they've been kept in the loop. They know what's happening, and you know, while I'm sure they'd love to see that the movie's finished, they haven't been victim of a scam, right? Anybody who might have given money to somebody on behalf of ZCon at the Cyclones game, which we were supposedly advertised at, that would be a higher risk situation.
Well, I would also say, you know, look, I go to conventions all over the place, and people give donations to the film or a donation to the nonprofit in exchange for some gift. If you're giving like $5 or $10, it's an act of faith. You know, you could spend that money on Starbucks or fast food. So I wouldn't be really worried. Where I'd start to worry is when you're giving hundreds or thousands of dollars to a film for the first time. Get really cautious and get really skeptical and ask questions. And you know, the filmmaker should not be offended because you want to know where your money is going. I don't have a problem if somebody asks me where the money is going to be spent. You know, it's I can just honestly tell you from my perspective, the lesson I have is more for filmmakers than for contributors, because I'm very fortunate that the people that have supported the film continue to support us either morally or, you know, being friends. Like I love Bill Farrow and his family. His daughter Marissa was in the first film and was in the proof of concept, and they've come down from Connecticut to help out anytime. You know, Vince mentioned Hank and Laura Rapinski, and they drive up from Southern Maryland to be part of his makeup stuff. So they continue to support this as the production's since been over. So, you know, our community is not something that we take lightly. And I think if you really want to look at a filmmaker, look at how they handle their community. I mean, we've been kind of dark on this information that we're talking about on this podcast, only because honestly, it's maybe 72 to 90 hours old. This isn't like this is a lot of new information for us, and we're kind of giving it to you as like the first place we're really talking about it. So hopefully this is a really good avenue for a majority of our supporters and your listeners to hear about it.
It is, and by all means, when I send you guys the archive link, feel free to post this anywhere you need to post it. You know, nothing pisses me, you know, being a horror movie fan, being a guy who works on independent film, and, you know, I understand the hard work that goes into what you guys are doing, and I can only imagine how disheartening it was when you found out you guys got scammed the way that you did. And, you know, if there's anything that we can do on this podcast, if there's anything we can do on Horror Society, Living Dead Magazine, anything, you know, I want you guys to utilize me for that, because nothing pisses me off more than seeing people take advantage of people in our industry who are just trying to get their project out. You know, this really pisses me off, and I'm not even part of your project. You know, do you get where I'm coming from? This really pisses me off.
Absolutely.
Now imagine if you're Vince and I.
I know. I mean, I can only imagine. See, it's a good thing I wasn't part of it, because I would have brought their heads back to you. But that's just me. I mean,
I just want to be diplomatic and say, I mean, we're on an interview. This is public. Like, I don't physically wish this woman any harm. I just want this to be closure.
I didn't threaten anybody.
I'm not saying you did, but honestly, I want closure for the hundreds of people that supported the crowdfunding campaign. I want closure for the actors and the crew who are waiting to find out what's next. I want closure for Vince, who I know has spent hours and nights, and even Gina, his wife, who's had to watch him kind of be obsessive compulsive about this sometimes. Like, for me, this isn't just about, you know, the money. It's also about closure for everybody involved, on top of the list of people that, you know, in the last week that we found have also been impacted by this woman, who we're not going to list names publicly because it's not our place to do that. But, you know, as Vince mentioned,
I actually want to take a second, if I can. Can I take another minute to just sort of wrap this part of the story? Awesome.
Certainly.
So, you know, this sort of gets filed under light at the end of the tunnel that would represent justice. So you reached out to me because you had seen a public post that I had made about this experience.
Yeah.
And between that public post and research I've done, we've actually located at least 2 other victims of this woman with much stronger, I'll say stronger, more solid evidence in the sense that they were taken from as opposed to promised to. And we are lighting things back up with the district attorney, possibly the attorney general's office, to bring Kellyanne Tobin and Patty Svett to justice. I have 2 victims in the bag, meaning I've collected their evidence and they're now cooperating with me. So because of the awareness that Facebook, Twitter, even our Instagram has generated, and now hopefully due to the awareness that your podcast is generating, we'll find the rest of them. And through that, we'll build a stronger case. Where Kellyanne might have taken us for $30,000, my current case is over $250,000.
Oh my God.
And while we're talking about it, since we're going through everything, like I just want to take a second and through the last week, we kind of had things come to light where, you know, Vince mentioned Sharing and Caring, the charity she worked with. Vince had an amazing meeting with one of the vice presidents of their board, and come to find out that they've separated relations with her. You know, they've done so publicly, and they're offering help in ways that they can. So, you know, it was
not
initially...
only that, they actually, Sharing and Caring turned out to be not a financial victim, but they were victimized from her as well, in the sense that she utilized her connections through them and falsified various communications to take advantage of others. So we've gotten, you know, I said 2 victims, I guess we're talking 3 now. Yeah, I mean, Sharing and Caring has turned out to be an awesome ally, and, you know, another one of us who's standing here looking for justice.
Well, you know, guys, you know, the only thing that I can say to you is I am so sorry that this has happened, and I know you're trying to get the film back on track and everything, and I'll get in contact with you guys probably tomorrow or the following day. I would like to do a follow-up written piece for the Horror Society website, because I can certainly spread the word out journalistically about what happened to you guys, you know, so people can keep an eye out for what's going on and bring more attention to ZCon so that you guys can finish this product. We're right here at the tail end, you know. Tell people where to go to find out about your film so that they can watch the videos, website, social media, anything that you guys want to get out about ZCon so that the fans can go out there and see the time and the effort that you guys have put into your project.
Yeah, if you want to do it's actually go to facebook.com/ZCon movie. You'll be able to see a lot of the photos and updates there. We've been, like, as I mentioned earlier, we've been really quiet on social media through the ZCon outlets, mainly because we're trying to get some the information that we shared on this podcast is the first time we're really sharing it anywhere outside of like Vince's personal posts, which this call has been more in depth than even those posts have. So after this, we're definitely going to go a little bit more public, but go to facebook.com/ZCon movie. Twitter is ZCon movie. If they want to email me directly with questions, it's bigdamnfilms@gmail.com, BIGDAMNFILMS@gmail.com, and I'll happily get them any information and contact info they want. Just to be clear, we're really not on here looking for donations. We don't want anybody's money. I mean, if they want to help and get everything back on track, it's really, really great and admirable. But you know, right now, I probably want our primary focus. I mean, my and Vince's primary focus, just to get some closure on this case that's taken us about a year to get back on track.
Absolutely.
Well, guys, again,
and anyone that has information or anybody else that has had experiences can contact us through Big Damn Films or by looking me up. I mean, if you Google Action Fans, you can get in touch with me pretty easy.
And I just want to take a moment to plug Vince. Like, if you are working on a movie, whether it is horror or sci-fi, to even just something with beauty makeup, like, I've watched this man's art evolve since 2012, and he can do everything from, you're welcome, he can do everything from like prosthetic heads and limbs to beauty makeup to airbrush. Like, seriously, this is a guy that deserves to be working on a hell of a lot more movies.
Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you for being on, and I'm I can't express enough how sorry I am for everything that you guys have gone through and had to go through. But like I said, if there's anything we can do at Horror Society, through the podcast, through Living Dead Magazine, we will do it. And like I said, I will be in contact with you in the next day or two, because I definitely want to do a write-up about this for Horror Society and do anything I can to help you guys get this back on track. I mean, hell, if you guys get back to filming, I might have to take a trip up to Maryland, because I used to live in Reisterstown, so I know the area.
Yeah, nice. We'd be happy to have you, man. We still got a lot left to film.
It sounds good. Guys, thank you so much for being on, and I will be in touch with you all very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
You know it, guys. Anytime. And once again, ladies and gentlemen, that was effects artist and actor Vince Collura and Z-Con director Michael C. Daltrey. It's a shame that what happened with the fundraising and the scam. I certainly hope that justice is found for both of these gentlemen, and I will be doing a piece about what has happened to them and go into a little bit more detail on some of the finer points. But definitely go check out Z-Con, see what it's all about, check out Vince's work, check out Michael's work, and we hope that there is a happy conclusion coming for them very soon. Coming up in a few minutes, we're going to go into our second digital dismemberment spotlight for the evening. We will be reviewing Scream Factory's special edition Blu-ray release of Wes Craven's The People Under the Stairs. But before that, we're going to go into our final Metal Blade spotlight song for the evening. Once again, the band is Behemoth. The CD is The Satanist. The song is Oh Father, Oh Satan, Oh Son. And you just heard the band Behemoth from the CD The Satanist. Oh Father, oh Satan, oh Son. But now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time once again for some digital dismemberment.
Digital dismemberment.
And in our second digital dismemberment spotlight for the evening, we are covering Scream Factory's special edition Blu-ray release of Wes Craven's The People Under the Stairs. Shout Factory has announced the August 11th Blu-ray release of horror master Wes Craven's The People Under the Stairs Collector's Edition. The Scream Factory treatment of this much-loved film includes several new bonus features. This terrifying journey from the director of A Nightmare on Elm Street and Scream takes you inside a demented house. Trapped inside the fortified home owned by a mysterious couple, a young boy is suddenly thrust into a nightmare, quickly learning the true nature of the house's homicidal inhabitants and the secret creatures hidden deep within the house. Starring Everett McGill of Twin Peaks and Dune, Wendy Roby, also of Twin Peaks, Brandon Adams of The Mighty Ducks, Ving Rhames, Piranha 3D, Mission Impossible, A.J. Langer, Escape from L.A., and Sean Whalen, Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 and Hatchet 3, this ambitious, very strange horror movie will grab you when you least expect it and never let go. An absolutely stunning film from Wes Craven. Definitely a classic in my mind. To jump right into it, there's a young boy who goes by the name of Fool, Poindexter Williams, and he lives in a ghetto. He and his family are getting ready to be evicted from their apartment by their landlords, who are the Robersons. Fool winds up getting caught up with Leroy, who's played by Ving Rhames, and his partner Spencer, and they're going to break into the Robersons' home using Spencer to pose as a gas worker. Allegedly, there are gold coins hidden in the house, and the idea is to break into the house to steal the gold coins so that Fool can pay for the rent and also a surgery his mother has because she has cancer. If they can't pay it, they get evicted, and they're the last people in their building. Fool initially tries to gain entry by being a Boy Scout, but Mrs. Roberson will not let him into the house. So Spencer puts on his uniform and tries to get into the house. And he's in there for a while, and Leroy seems to think that Spencer is stealing everything for his own benefit to cut them out. So when they see Mrs. Roberson leave, they break into the house and are attacked by the guard dog, which they manage to lock off into another section of the house, and they start searching the house. Fool winds up finding Spencer in the basement, dead, with a gold coin in his hand, and he goes to find Leroy. But they wind up being trapped in the house when the Robersons return home. Leroy winds up being shot and murdered by Eldon Roberson, and Fool is left to his own devices, and he quickly finds out things are not quite what they seem in the house. There are people living inside the walls and in the basement of the house, and they appear to be tortured, grotesque people. You're not really quite sure in the beginning what the deal is with all of these people. And the Robersons have a little girl upstairs. Her name is Alice. So Fool is going through the house trying to escape from Mr. Roberson, who knows that he's there. Alice, he winds up meeting Alice, the daughter, and she tells him that the people that are under the stairs and inside the walls were children who broke the quote-unquote see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil rules of the Robersons. They've basically become cannibals to survive, and Alice has been spared because she follows the rules. there's a young boy named Roach whose tongue was removed who lives in the walls and basically creates chaos for the Robersons. So Fool winds up being caught by the dad a little bit later in the film, and he's thrown in with the other cannibal children to die. However, Roach helps Fool escape, but he winds up becoming wounded and gives Fool a small bag of gold and basically intimates to him to save Alice. Fool finds Alice, and they go through the passageways in the wall, and the father releases the dog into the walls and try and kill him, and Fool winds up getting the dog killed to escape from the dad. They both reach the attic, and there's a pond down below. Alice is afraid to jump, but Fool jumps, and he promises to return. When he gets back to his house, he shows the gold to pay the rent in his mother's surgery, and he gets a little bit more backstory on the Robersons, and it turns out that they're actually brother and sister. They're inbreds. And their family had been running the funeral home, selling cheap coffins for high prices, and then moved into real estate, buying out buildings in the ghetto and kicking people out to put in new buildings to make more money. So Fool decides that he's got to go back and he's got to save Alice. He goes back into the house, and there's another epic confrontation. As Fool deals with Daddy Roberson, the mother tries to kill Alice, but the people under the stairs break out and wind up saving her, in turn killing Mrs. Roberson. There's a crowd of people from the ghetto out there who are trying to get into the house to picket what's going on, and they find out that there's crazy stuff going on in the house. Fool is down in the basement with the father, and he finds a room that's loaded with gold coins and money. And he winds up trapping the father into the room, and there's dynamite. Fool winds up blowing up a part of the dynamite, and money and the gold rain out through the windows and through the chimney to the people outside. The people under the stairs wind up getting out and leaving during the commotion. The father is killed during the explosion, and Fool finds Alice in the basement. And that's basically pretty much how the movie ends. It's a great pace, great acting. Everything about the film is high-quality entertainment. The effects are outstanding. The real gem in all of this are the special features. There's audio commentary with writer-director Wes Craven, of course. There's audio commentary with actors Brandon Adams, A.J. Langer, Sean Whalen, and Jan Birch. There's an interview with Wendy Roby entitled House Mother, and it goes into a lot of details about her and her co-star, how they had worked together, Everett McGill, and how well they work together on the screen. In particular, she talks about a particular bathtub scene in the film with AJ, which comes across really graphically on screen. You also have What Lies Beneath, an interview with special effects artist Greg Nicotero, Howard Berger, and Robert Kurtzman. I thought that was very highly entertaining with a lot of great information. You have House of Horrors, an interview with director of photography Sandy Cecil. Settling the Score, an interview with composer Don Peake. There's a behind-the-scenes, there's a vintage making-of featurette. There's theatrical trailers, TV spots, and still galleries. Overall, I would give this movie a 4 out of 5 stars. In particular, I give the disc a 9 out of 10. The alternate cover art looks absolutely fantastic. You can get your copy of the Wes Craven's The People Under the Stairs from Shout Factory, so make sure to head on over and check that out. Fantastic show. I want to say thank you to our friends at Metal Blade for our outstanding music. Thank you to our friends at Scream Factory for The People Under the Stairs. And thank you to our friends at Chemical Burn Entertainment for sending us our copy of Bloody Indulgent for viewing. I also want to say thank you again so much to Vince Collura and director Michael C. Daughtry to talk to us about Z-Con and all that happened with them. Make sure to keep an eye on the Horror Society as I do a follow-up article on what happened to them and to just get the word out about the horrible person who did these things to them. It's been great. And until next week, ladies and gentlemen, this is the dead man, Michael Jones from Horror Society and Living Dead magazine, telling you all to rest.